Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and... Guys, I found this really great album that's coming out. Oh really? I found a great book. Wait. At a corner table by the fire are two people. They're trying to figure out what's going on with this book album thing too. One of them is me, Matthew Mellema, and welcome to Believe to See. We are a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Anselm Society is a coalition of churches across the Front Range of Colorado dedicated to one very simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. To learn more about Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're at it, why not rate and review this show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And for today's episode, this will be a good one. I know I say that about everyone, but I really mean it about this one. And to give you an idea, this is somebody who I follow on social media and who I enjoy following on social media. That's a very select group of people who I follow. Is like, oh, I'm glad he posted that. One of the things that he's known for is the van that he travels around the country in, Vandolph the White.
Yes. And
as I'm pulling up to the house where he's staying, I saw this big white van. I was like, oh, I wonder what that... Oh, wait a sec. It's Vandolph the White. I know this guy. I know this from the internet. So here he is, the driver of Vandolph the White, among other things, Matthew Clark. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. So glad to be here.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what you do, who you are. But first off, you have a lot of connections with the Anselm Society. So well, I'll be selfish. Tell us about your connections with the Anselm.
Oh, man. Yeah, Anselm has been such a central kind of home for me the last, 4 or 5 years, really. More and more every year, I feel like. This room that we're in right now is Terry and Steve Moon's basement bedroom, and they are Anselmers. And this album would not have been made had it not been for the Anselm Society, really. And I've enjoyed getting to speak some at some of the conferences and attend some of the conferences, and so encouraged. And every time I come here to Colorado Springs, it gets a little bit harder to leave just because of...
Well, there's one way to fix that.
Yeah, I know. Thankfully, houses are very cheap.
Just find a permanent place for Vandolph.
Right, I just need a little parking space. That'll do. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're also, so like you mentioned, you've spoken at several of our conferences. You're on the leadership team, so we'll see each other during leadership meetings. You're usually over Zoom, wayfaring across the country, so it's interesting to see you in person right now.
Yeah, I'm a real person, man.
A real person.
Yeah.
Yeah, a real person who makes real art. So let's talk about your artistic background in general, and then we want to talk about your specific project, Only the Lover Sings, here soon. But let's talk about what you do in general, because a trip to your website reveals you are a man of many talents.
Well, aside from converting Sprinter vans into campers, I love to write songs. That's one of my favorite things to do. And in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've gotten a lot more involved in just writing essays, writing a podcast of my own called 1,000 Words. I've had the chance to kind of grow towards sharing at conferences and retreats, which honestly, that's something I love to do, but it's not something I necessarily planned or pursued. It's just something that kind of has developed over the last several years.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, your social media is filled with good anecdotes about traveling in Vandolph. What percentage of the year would you say you're on the road?
So there's a little bit of a story to this, because obviously not very much of the last 2 years because of COVID. So, but normally I split my year up according to kind of agricultural seasons. I got really into windleberry, and
you see, he really fits in with Anselm. He gets us.
And I grew up in Mississippi. I still live in Mississippi. My dad is a tree farmer. My dad is basically a windleberry character in real life. He doesn't know that, because, if you're a character in Wendell-Berry, you don't know that you're a character.
Wendell-Berry characters don't necessarily read Wendell-Berry.
Exactly, yeah. So Dad is a farmer type, and I got into Wendell-Berry, and he was talking a lot about how we are creatures living in a creation made by a creator, and so we actually do belong in this world, but we have broken a lot of those connections by, we have kind of these buffers between us and the world we're made to live in.
Mm-hmm.
The most simple being something like electric light. Since the Industrial Revolution, you got electric light so you can work all night long. Anyway, so that breaks up the rhythms of creation. So I was thinking, what if I split up my year into kind of an agricultural template? And so I really tour primarily in the late summer and during the fall. That's kind of the harvest season.
Oh, gotcha.
And then the winter, I kind of lay low and rest and have Thanksgiving and Christmas with family and just kind of pray and dream about what might be next. Then spring is kind of more I work on projects and develop things and start planning a tour, and then it starts all over again. So
okay, well,
so that's a long answer to that simple question, but
well, I wasn't expecting Wendell Berry to get thrown into there, but
he's in there.
I'm glad he did.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so you've done a lot of different projects. You had a couple different albums. Like you said, you do some writing for various friends of Anselm. And let me also make a plug for your podcast. What is it, 1,000 words? It's not 8,000 words, right?
1,000 words,
okay.
Stories on the way.
There you go. That is an official, if we have this, it is. It's an official Friend of Anselm podcast. It is Anselm approved 100%. Okay.
Oh, thank you. The stamp. I got the
exactly.
stamp.
Exactly. I had a conversation with Brian Brown about how good your podcast was. So that's the official stamp of approval.
Well, thank you. I should thank you here now that I'm sitting here in front of you. Thanks.
But let's talk about your latest project, because this latest project is very interesting. It's going a slightly different direction than some of your old stuff, but also in keeping with it. I don't mean to talk in riddles, but tell us a little bit.
You mystify me, Matt.
Yes, I always talk in riddles. But tell us a little bit about Only the Lover Sings.
Yeah, would you like me to talk in riddles?
You could if you wanted to.
Oh, I think I'll just be direct. Yeah, this project, so the last project I made was in 2016, last full-length album. So it's really been a while, and I had been writing little scraps of song and collecting things like that for the last 6 years. And this has been brewing for a long time, and it's Only the Lover Sings is the first in a trilogy of albums, so it's part one of the Well trilogy, and it really centers around sort of the bones thematically of the album is this scene in John 4, the woman at the well, Jesus and this woman meeting one another. So this first album is very much about encounter and making contact, honestly making contact, facing Jesus and being faced by Jesus. And what are the obstacles to that? You know, what things are we afraid of that keep us from turning towards Jesus, responding to his invitation? Whether it's the ways that we've been hurt or the ways we've hurt other people or the way that the world has just fallen apart or been pulled out from under us. And then the surprise that we find if we do finally have the courage to turn and see his face. The surprise is that it is a shining face. Do you know that line? It says, make the light of your face to shine upon us. It's this blessing from Numbers. And a shining face is a smiling face. That's kind of the idea. And so the surprise is that the woman at the well is sure that there's no way God could ever smile at her. But when she finally, by the end of the conversation, turns and catches the look in Jesus' eye, it's a warm, welcoming. It's some kind of look that changed everything for her. Whatever it was, it's not actually described. That's kind of the interesting thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't say like, and his face looked like this. You don't see what his face looked like. You just see what happened because of what she saw in his face, which is really fascinating. So the album is kind of exploring these kinds of things.
All right. So let's take a half step back from there, because I'm really interested at the genesis of this project. So first of all, there's the concept of doing a book and an album. So you've had albums in the past,
right?
So this is another album, but this is your first time adding like a companion book. What gave you the idea for that?
Well, on a really simple level, I just missed like the tangibility of music. Everything's gone digital, which is fine. But you don't have anything to like look at or touch or hold on to. And that used to be really fun, to get an album. And then I missed liner notes. I was like, oh, it used to be so fun to like read the lyrics and like see who played what instruments are on there, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, so what if the music is just going to be digital? It's going to be on Spotify. There's no way around that. Even for myself, that's how I listen to music, right? I don't have a CD player in my car. But what if we could just take the idea of liner notes and just massively blow that up into like 180 pages of liner notes?
The world's largest liner notes.
Yeah.
I like it.
And I was like, well, that would be fun to me. I don't know if anybody else would like that, but I would.
I think that's how most good ideas start. Well, I like it, and then you sort of let it ferment for a while.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about. I want to talk about the essays really soon, because it looks like you got a really good roster of people contributing essays to it. But first, I want to dwell a little bit about the woman at the well. So first off, what inspired you to base a whole album around her?
Yeah.
And second, when I first saw it, like the Well trilogy. Okay, so maybe there's like Jacob at the Well and others, but like, no, not just one album, 3 albums about this one story. So am I right in saying that this account captured your imagination in a really special way?
Oh, definitely. But you're wrong in one other respect
that
I would like to bring forward.
Okay.
No, so every album is not about the woman at the well. So the first album is about that encounter. And generally it's about a one-on-one meeting with Jesus, responding to him. The second album is called A Tale of Two Trees. And it's about faith-keeping. And choosing which family tree I'm going to participate in on a daily basis. The family tree of God or the family tree of evil. So it's about persevering. And then the third album is called Where the River Goes. And it's about the return of Christ and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit and the making of all things new. So that's kind of the arc of the whole trilogy. And all the songs are written and... but they'll come out over 3 years.
Okay.
So, But yeah, the woman at the well, it's very personal, and folks who pick up the book will very quickly realize that this is definitely coming from a very personal place. And I feel like the people who have encouraged me most with their art or with their writing have been people who were willing to go to really vulnerable places. Not in a way that burdened me, but in a way that made me feel less alone. Henry Nouwen is one of those authors who's been such a great companion for me. A lot of songwriters that I love have done that. And so this came out of a place of really intense grief after a divorce, after the death of this big dream, this marriage that I had hoped for. And after all of that really blew apart, and was really a scary experience, I found myself feeling like I just couldn't imagine. I didn't understand my own life anymore. It didn't make any sense to me. And I couldn't see past that point to anything good. I couldn't imagine any good possibilities past that sort of line in the sand, But the Lord was so good to me in that place of bewilderment, and that it was a really interesting experience because this story just kept coming back up over and over and over again. It seemed like I couldn't get away from this particular scene with this woman meeting this man at the well, and I felt like there was something I needed to pay attention to. And so I just sort of dwelt there for several years, and the Lord really used that story of this woman who probably felt the same way, who felt like my life has gotten so has become so unrecognizable to me. I can't imagine any good thing. And then here comes Jesus, and he goes into the place where she is, in that place of desolation and thirst and exhaustion, and he brings the light of his face, and he says, I can meet you here. I can meet you anywhere. And I can show you a way through this.
Yeah, and a lot of those themes, I think, come really to the forefront at the I'm not into all the music terms, but the single, the cover song of your work, Only the Lover Sings. So that one, listening to it, you can definitely see all the echoes of that story there. But you got the title of that, I believe, from a book by, this is a person who I've read his name, but I'm afraid to pronounce his name.
Joseph Pieper, I think, is the technically correct way.
Okay, because I read, it's like, Pieper? That can't be right.
Yeah.
No, that can't be right. Okay, Joseph Pieper.
Joseph Pieper, yeah.
So you got the title, Only the Lover Sings, from this kind of slim book by Joseph Pieper. Tell us a little bit about that and how that fit in with the woman at the well.
Yeah, so this is kind of complicated. This is one of those things where, like, I love this connection, but I always worry that I'm like, this is not going to make sense to anybody else, but I'm just going to do it anyway. So that little book, it's this tiny little book. It's 75 pages, and it's about like a 3x5 book, And that book showed up in that time of grief and healing, and I just looped it. I just read it and read it again and again. And interestingly, it's a little book of philosophy, and he's talking about learning to contemplate, which, that sounds like a you guys need to learn to contemplate, man. Excuse me while I contemplate over here. Pass me some chips.
Don't bother me, I'm contemplating.
Right? But the way that he defines contemplation is it's basically attentiveness to God. And he says, if you look at the word contemplate, you can see the word temple is tucked in the word. And so to contemplate is to go to the dwelling place of the deity and bow and listen and pay attention, to have ears that hear, to grow ears that hear and eyes that see. And this shows up in Psalm 27, I think, is one of my favorite little spots where you see the Pieper's idea of contemplation, where it says, there's one thing I desire above all else, which is to dwell in, to go, I'm not quoting it right, but, to gaze upon your beauty, to contemplate your beauty in your temple, O Lord. And so the psalmist is saying this too, but Pieper is talking about how we're so out of practice with that, and we're so distracted. So I felt like what he was describing of our culture, as we're distracted and we're afraid to look, was very much what I was feeling, was very much what I felt like the woman at the well was also feeling, as she goes, and there's Jesus, but it's very hard for her to look at him, to pay attention to him, because it might be scary. But the title, Only the Lover Sings, is actually a quote from St. Augustine. So I stole the title from Pieper, who also stole yes, so it's fair. It's totally fair game. But the idea is that only the one, you're never going to find the song of your heart if you don't attend to the face of God. If you don't turn in the hope of love or with this posture of attentiveness, you'll never discover the face of God and how much he loves you. So only the one who turns and looks, who repents and turns and looks and responds to God, is given a new song. And so the woman is given a new song because she looks, she becomes the lover and finds out that she is the beloved. Does that make sense?
It does. Don't worry. I was totally getting so Augustine through Pieper to, it's a clear line. It works. And as you were talking, if you're wondering why I pulled out my phone while you were talking, it's because there's a line in the Anglican prayer book that came to mind.
Yeah, okay.
And listeners, I do understand that a lot of you are not Anglican, and that's okay. That's fine. So let me just say that. But the general thanksgiving at the end, it says, among other things, and we pray, give us such an awareness of your mercies that with truly thankful hearts we may show forth your praise. I love that language where the key is to be aware of it. Like, God's mercies are everywhere.
Right.
And if we were attending to it, we would be... the natural response is thanksgiving at God's mercies everywhere. It's just attending to it. And it's so easy to not do that.
Oh man, everything in the world is trying to distract you. And I remember reading Chesterton and Lewis and Tolkien as a kid, and as a late high school young adult, and going up to the mentor who had introduced me to a lot of these guys and just saying, oh, I wish I could see the way that Chesterton sees or Lewis sees or Tolkien sees. And he stopped me. He's one of these kind of guys. He stopped me and he said, oh no, it's not that you need to see through the lens. I had said, I want to see through the lens. He said, it's not that you need to see through the lens. It's that they didn't see through lenses. They saw the real.
Ooh,
yeah,
that was good.
And I was like, okay, all right. Then I want my lenses removed.
Yeah, take the lenses off. Yeah,
I want to see what's really there.
I love that. There's a poem by G.K. Chesterton called "Modern Elfland" that I really like, and the conceit of it is he's walking through like modern London. He's all bummed out, like the world used to be cool, but now look, it's all these just friggin' cars and trains and lampposts. Then as he goes, he's trained to see things maybe without the lenses on and seeing like the wonder all around him. And when it ends, it's like he's refound his home, even in modern London. Yeah, and that's a better way to put it. I think it's not he put on his elf glasses. It's right. He took off his modern distraction glasses.
Right. What poem is it? Is it Is it God's Grandeur that talks about, where Hopkins talks about how can feet feel now being shod, and how can how does man not wreck his rod, and the smudge and the smear and the smell of man, is all these things are getting in the way. But it's not that God is not there, or his goodness is not there, or the story is not still going on. It's that we have we've tuned out.
Yeah, we tune out, we distract ourselves, we try to change the subject. Speaking of which, one of the little details of the woman at the well story that I've always found just kind of amusing, because I recognize myself there, is when Jesus starts to talk to the woman, then you can, maybe I'm inferring to it, but you can almost feel like the woman's getting a little uncomfortable because it's hitting too close to home, so she changes the subject. It's like, hey, Jesus, our father, like Jacob, had this well, but you Jewish people say it's that one. Which one do you think? It's like, hey, let's talk about this controversy. We'll talk politics. Here we go. It's like she's afraid to go deep, so it's like, here, let's stay on the surface with distractions.
Oh, I think you're spot on. So one of the things about this story is, and this is true about the way we read Scripture too, is we get these kind of lenses on, and we miss how relatable and real this stuff really is, and how interesting it is. Like, the more I read the story, the more the reality of this woman came out as like a real person. And and you start out the story, and this is a weird meeting, and this guy that I don't know, just like
it's the hottest time of the day when no one's supposed to be out.
And you wonder, like, what is she thinking? Is she thinking like, is this guy hitting on me? Like, what's going on? And then he's talking weird stuff like, you ought to be asking me for water, if you know what I mean. And she's like, I don't know what you mean. It's weird. And she's kind of playing along because, she's an experienced woman. And this is weird. And then he asks about the husbands. And that gets real weird. Now she's very uncomfortable, right? And in one of the theme song of the album, it's called "The Well." It says he said the worst thing he could say, when he laid her sin out plain in the open light of day. And you're right. At that point, she says, "Oh." Well, from up to this point, she's been kind of playing a little bit sarcastic, a little playful thing, and now she's like, "Ooh, why'd you go there?" And then she totally flips it and she says, but I can play the spiritual card too.
Yes.
And she's like, oh, well, I can see that you're a prophet, and she goes, and then she's like, goes into religious talk. Yeah, it's so fascinating. It's such an incredible, interesting interaction. But she's deflecting, like she's changing the subject.
And then after she does, they're like, hey, let's talk politics. Samaritans versus...
right.
Yeah, let's talk that. And Jesus' response is sort of like, well... here's the answer, but that's sort of beside the point. You're missing the big point. Yeah, I don't really, let's focus on the main thing here.
Yeah, mountains. I don't really care about which mountain. And he says something interesting to me that really became important to me. was he says that what the Father is looking for is not a magic mountain here or there. And what the Father is interested in is people who will show up in spirit and truth, who will worship him in spirit and truth. And I think something of the sense of what he's saying there maybe has to do with like people who will just tell the truth about where they really are. Mm-hmm. Because, and this is the idea in the title track of the album, it says, you've never met a liar. You've only ever met the lie that they put forth. There's no one more lonely, because until you tell the truth, you can't be touched. Mm. And so here's this woman who, she's doing the best she can with the life she has. It's not great. And it's probably not all her fault. But until she can allow Jesus, who brings up all the worst stuff, until she can meet him there and be that honest with him and not evade or change the subject, nothing can change. Mm. But when she brings her true baggage, if she brings that real self into contact with him, then she discovers that a real change is possible.
Yeah, and I like the way you phrased what she's doing there with almost like deflecting things with like sarcasm and things like that. I didn't really think about her lines that way, but I guess when Jesus is asking, well, what you really need is living water. Then you'll never thirst again. And her response is like, oh, that'd be great. Then I wouldn't have to come out here. It's like the little joke. It almost seems like a defense mechanism. Like you get the really gives a strong impression of this woman who's, kind of world weary, jaded, seen it all, and it has sort of these defenses of sort of irony, sarcasm.
Exactly.
Very, very eager to change the subject. And again, I'm just like, yep, she is speaking my language. Yes.
Exactly.
Deflect, change the subject, because it feels awkward if we're getting too real with the talk. Yes, I understand all of that.
Yeah, you can really, it is uncomfortable in a way. Because you can once you begin to pick up on the defense mechanisms, mm-hmm. this story becomes painfully relatable.
Yeah, like if you or me was like standing with Jesus during this interaction, and Jesus was like, yeah, you've actually had 5 husbands, I'd be like, oh gosh, I feel so uncomfortable now. Oh my gosh, why do we have to go there?
Yeah.
Like it almost seems like a faux pas, right? Like you don't say that out loud, but he's just cutting right to the chase.
And the crazy thing is, by the end of the story, what is her tagline when she runs to tell the rest of the town? What does she say? She says, you got to come meet him. He told me everything I ever did. And so like the worst possible, most uncomfortable point in the conversation that we would think becomes the theme of her song.
Yep.
And I think the idea there is that I know for me, when I was in that place of grief, and something I was talking about with some friends the other night, is that grief is something you want to solve, but you can't solve it. You can't make it go away. Mm-hmm. You have to learn how to allow Jesus to enter into it and meet you there and walk with you through it. Lewis talked about Jesus didn't come to take pain away. He came to make a way through it. And I think this woman too is learning, or has learned by the time she's proclaiming to the rest of the town, she has found that God is actually willing to meet her right down in the very worst spot imaginable, mm-hmm. where you'd think God is too clean to go there. He can't possibly go into this place. But there he is. He's right there with her. And so she goes saying the most embarrassing thing is like the best thing. Now, like that's what she's excited to sing about in the town.
I love that. And so something related to that, and that I saw this mentioned to prepare. I was scouring your website, so I get how creepy that would sound in any other circumstance. I was stalking you online, but but for this, I noticed your explanation for "Only the Lover Sings," like the song, and you were talking about the necessity of. Well, not even the necessity, the purpose of feasting, and how we oftentimes miss that because we're so just utilitarian in our mindset here. How does that relate to the rest of this?
Oh, that is interesting. So there's a lot about feasting on the second album, in the writing on the second album.
It's a sneak peek ahead.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the idea of singing, first of all, if you think of singing not just strictly in terms of literal music making, but you think of singing as a sort of term that's like a catch-all term for any kind of loving response to what God has done for us, then singing is also a kind of feasting. Singing is a way of bearing witness in the world to the goodness of God. It's a way of saying that this is true, right? And I love one of the most influential books for this project is called is by a guy named David Ford out of Cambridge, and it's called Self and Salvation. And Bruce Herman, the painter, read it and recommended it because it was a big inspiration for the collaborative project that he did with Malcolm Guite and Jack Redford, the Ordinary Saints project. I don't know if you're familiar with that project.
No, but I am going to make a note, and I will look it up after this.
Listeners, look up ordinarysaints.com, I think. It's an amazing collaborative project between a painter, a poet, priest, and a composer. And but anyway, Bruce Herman recommended this book by David Ford, Self and Salvation, which sounds kind of weird, but a lot of it is about this idea of facing, and that the truth about reality is obscured, like we've talked about with these lenses. The truth about reality and the real story of the world has been so obscured and paved over and, drowned out with noise and distraction that that reality has been reduced, right, to materiality, naturalism. All of these things have reduced reality to like, oh, love isn't real. It's just chemicals bouncing around in your brain. That's all you are, and electrical impulses, and you're just material, and you'll die. And it's like this, and it's like, oh my gosh, if that's all that life really is, then
you'll die, the universe will explode, and nothing will exist anymore. So relax.
Right. I'm like, yeah, but I kind of want life to mean something. Can't we have that too? But this is kind of where we are right now. We're in a storylessness. And this is one of the things I love about Anselm, because Anselm is digging out from under this rubble, and saying, oh, there's blue sky up there. Oh, there's wind and birds, and we don't have to just live in this hole.
I think it does come back around.
Oh, feasting.
Yeah, because as you were talking, I was like making the little connections about, like you talked about feasting as like bearing witness to the goodness of God, and that just made me think, oh yeah, it's showing that we're being attentive to this. It's like, hey, we're gonna see things without the lenses on, and when we do, we see God's mercies everywhere. We see His goodness everywhere, so we're gonna celebrate it.
Yeah, and if this story weren't true, why would you feast?
Yeah.
What is there to feast about?
Yeah.
If it's just survival of the fittest, and if we're just nothing but chemicals bouncing around, and there's no such thing as love or transcendence or beauty or goodness or truth, then who cares? Life is stupid. But Christians know something better. I think it's the last page of Orthodoxy, Chesterton's Orthodoxy, is one of my favorite books. And it helps me believe in joy. That book is a feast, and he is a lover who is singing because of what he has seen in the face of Jesus. And on one of the last pages, he says, the way the pagans thought was that life and the world were primarily sorrow, with just this thin little crust of joy. If you think of an apple, it's like the skin is joy, and the rest of the apple is just rot. It's just sorrow. And he said that was the small, what does he call it? The small publicity of the pagan. And he says, but the great secret of the Christian is that it's actually the opposite is true. Actually, the majority of reality is pure joy. And just the skin of the apple is sorrow. But the skin is all you see when you look at an apple, so it looks like it's everything. But it's actually just this little thin layer, right? And when you bite into the apple, you find that really it's sweet. Life is sweet. That's what's at the heart of reality. And so Christians believe something very specific about reality, that it is actually very good. And so in a world that cannot account for that, doesn't have any kind of narrative or system to make sense of that, Christians are keeping a feast in the midst of that to bear witness to what is actually true about reality, which is the goodness of God.
Yeah, and keeping the feast is not always the easiest.
No.
Or like, when we're doing the 12 days of Christmas, you get around to like day 11 or 12, like, I'm kind of done. I'm burned out. I'm kind of depressed. I really don't feel like feasting right now. It's like, okay, I'll feast. Here we go.
Well, Chesterton also says, he says, God has the eternal appetite of infancy.
Yep.
And our Father is younger than we are.
And
he says we wear out. We don't have the stamina to keep up with the goodness of God.
It's one of my favorite lines from Chesterton. And I'm like you when I read Orthodoxy. I'm one of those people who I underline things as I read.
Yeah, me too.
And when I'm reading Orthodoxy, it's like I underline the whole page, so that kind of defeats the purpose.
Let me circle this book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we. I love that.
Yeah, it's so true. So and that's a lot of what the second album is actually about, is how do you keep the feast when you feel like a total idiot, when you're, but you're learning to be a holy fool, you're learning to be like St. Francis was the jongleur of God. He was the sort of jester, and but he didn't care because he knew what was true, and he wanted other people to know that too. And that light of the face is kind of what we feast on. We feast on having found out what's really true because we've encountered Jesus, in spite of all the stuff that really is real too. All the pain is. Jesus' face doesn't belittle or discount the pain. It doesn't pretend like it's not there. Jesus is very realistic. He's not asking us to go into denial. That's something he's trying to get us out of. But he's trying to say, that is true, that is real. But it is not the only thing that's real and true. And it's certainly not the biggest thing that's real and true. There's a lot more going on, and I'm calling you through this and into this kingdom, this unimaginably vast realm of beauty and belovedness,
Yeah, I mean, going back to St. Francis actually made me think of another connection where Chesterton in his biography of St. Francis talks about how, St. Francis goes into the cave during this time of really intense searches, and he comes out. Chesterton has this line, and Mumford & Son adopted it for the song The Cave. Come out of the cave, walking on your hands, see the world hanging upside down. So it's like correcting the view. So it's like he comes out seeing the world completely differently. Like everyone's hanging upside down, he's the only one who sees it correctly.
Right. Yeah. I wrote a poem years and years ago called Feet Sky First.
There you go.
It was very much about that idea.
Was it from that line by Chesterton?
I think so, because I had read that biography probably around that time. Yeah. I don't remember any of the poem, and I'm sure it was terrible and it shouldn't be quoted. But I like the title.
So let's talk a little bit nuts and bolts of the book. So there are 11 songs on the album. So those are all from you. And then the book, I think there are 13 essays, and there's various authors who contribute to it.
Yeah.
Who are the authors, and how did you find them? How did you start collaborating with them?
Well, a lot of them are Anselm folks. But that was so fun to me. I felt too insecure to write the whole book, and I felt like I would never want to read it if I wrote the whole book. But I thought, man, I know a lot of people whose writing I love to read, whose writing has encouraged me, who's helped me, who I would love to hear their brains on this, and their hearts on this. How would they respond to this story? I know how I've responded to it, and I don't mind writing some about that, but I would love to bring some other people into the conversation to be surprised by what the Lord could say through them. I think that's so much of the joy of being a part of the church, is that, for one, you don't have to think of everything. That's a huge relief. And you can be surprised because you're not likely to think of everything. And so somebody else is going to bring some aspect of the Lord's good work that you would never think of. So I invited 10 essayists for this first album. I wrote an intro, an outro, and I wrote one of the essays. And then so I had 10 other essayists. Amy Lee, who's been on here a good bit.
Great friend of Anselm.
Yes.
Everyone read her straight away.
Yeah, Amy is one of my favorites. Her writing is so beautiful and so human. Lanier Ivester is another, and she's
also
spoken
a friend of Anselm, yes.
There's a guy named Rex Bradshaw, who's actually from my writing group back home. We have a little writing group. We've been meeting for about 2.5 years, and we read Diana Gleyer's Bandersnatch.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were like, let's do this. And we started a little group called the Draftlings. So we draft in both senses of draft beer, and although we don't actually have like a keg or anything, which we should. That'd be cool. But
you could probably rig one on top of Vandolph.
Oh, man. Stop giving me good ideas. And then we also just bring drafts of things to read. First drafts, second draft, and we give each other feedback. So Rex is a part of that group, and he's writing, and Junius, who's been at Anselm, Junius Johnson. Yeah, so there's a Thea Rosenberg, who I've actually some of the writers I've never met, actually. Yeah. She's a part of Square Halo. She's done editing and writing for Leslie and Ned Bustard's stuff, and that's how I met her, actually, was through their stuff. So Heidi White is actually...
Oh, okay, great.
She wrote a wonderful one on the woman at the well, and I didn't know this. So she is Orthodox, and this is something was so wonderful to have her voice and experience in there, because I didn't know that in the Orthodox tradition she has a name.
Really?
She's Saint Fotini.
Oh.
Did you know this?
I did not know she had a name, and she's a saint.
She's Saint Fotini.
Well,
Fotini
cool.
means, like photon. So she is the one on whom light has been shed.
Oh, that's great.
Right. So you've got the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus, and you've got this blessing from Numbers, Lord, make the light of your face shine upon us. And so she is the one on whom the light has shone.
Oh, that's great.
And she's Saint Fotini, and she's called the first evangelist.
Oh, because she went out into... I love that. I had no idea.
Yeah, isn't that great? So, and she... so evangelism is a form of singing. She goes out and she sings to the town, come meet this man.
Yeah.
So the first evangelist, the lover, sings.
That's fantastic.
But anyway, I loved having these. It's been so fun to be in conversation with other writers and folks,
Awesome. So, peeking ahead a little bit,
Yeah.
do you have the roster of writers for books 2 and 3? Are you going to use some of the same ones? You get new ones? Where's
It's mostly new people for each book.
Okay.
Because there are so many cool writers. Heidi did sneak onto the second book, so she's on there. Lancia Smith is writing for book 2. Emily Verdorn, do you know Emily Verdorn?
Yes.
She is a visual artist, and she had some stuff in the gala. She's had it for multiple.
Yeah, she had some pieces at our last conference.
Yeah. So she had a piece. I love her work. Follow her on Instagram, and I was reading her little artist statement thing that was on the wall beside her painting, and she was talking about, dryness and thirst and desert, and it was beautifully written. I'd never really read anything by her, and I thought, man, that is right. That is just perfect for the second album. So I asked her to write, and I just read her essay today. She just turned it in today, and I'm like, I just want it to be longer. Like, it's just, I just want to read this.
Just send the note, more please.
Just write about 1,000 more words, just so I don't have to finish the essay. Who else is writing? Susan Cowger is a poet that is a friend of Lancia's, and I reviewed a book of her poetry called Slender Warble about a year ago for Cultivating Project, and I just fell in love with her poetry, and it was brilliant, and she is writing. So anyway, there's I'm really excited about the folks that are writing for album 2, and I've got a few slots on album 3, but it's, it's like 2 years away, so
Yeah, we can. That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to book 1. So Only the Lovers Sing. So we are recording this on the evening of May 5th. The book launch is May 6th.
Tomorrow,
so
man.
we are recording on book launch eve.
Yeah.
And by the time this posts, it'll probably be like, a couple weeks afterwards. So by the time y'all are listening to this, it is red hot off the presses and ready for you to order. So if folks want to do that, where can they find it?
Yes. So the easiest place to go is just my website, which is matthewclark.net. And, the links to everything will be on there, but the book is available primarily through Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
You may have heard of that website.
I visited it a time
It's a
or
website
two.
you can go to.
I would tell a joke about Amazon. I'm pretty sure Jeff Bezos is listening to us right now. So
he's never far, is he?
Why is there a drone outside? Anyway.
So it'll be on Amazon, and then the music will be on all the streaming platforms. So Spotify, Amazon, and whatnot.
Yeah. Awesome. So again, MatthewClark.net or that little Amazon, whatever. Only the Lover Sings. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been so great to see you in person.
Yes.
And, I look forward to following more hijinks with you and Vandolph the White in the near future.
I'm sure there will be more.
So, as y'all can probably tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire's down to embers. The customers are trundling home. And you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Please rate and review our show when you get the chance. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.